Hey y'all, this is Kyo. I am here to kind of give my take on the Stop Killing Games, Thor, PirateSoftware, um, that mess. Because let's face it, at this point, this entire discussion is a mess. I think it's a good discussion. It's a discussion that needs to be had. I think it's a mess that needs to be hashed out. But I think at this point, it is safe to say that it is a mess. Um, Couple of caveats or provisions. What is an addendum before the fact? Because I think an addendum has to come after the fact, right? Whatever an addendum before the fact is, I'm going to assume no ill intent from anyone. I'm going to assume lobbyists are trying to do their job to the best of their ability, and their job is to make as much money for the developers and publishers, primarily the publishers, as they can, and make sure that the I don't want to say creativity of the creators is stifled as little as possible. I'm going to assume that, for example, Thor misunderstood or was misinformed on things. So, for example, misunderstood. The idea that games have to be preserved in a playable state. The fact that he took that to mean that they have to become a single player experience versus releasing the server as an executable so that people can host their own private servers for online games, I think is an example of a misunderstanding versus misinformation or being misinformed, where all that Thor found when he was looking up the crew was that it was an online only experience, which I believe is true. You did have to be online to play. But there was from my understanding, a hefty single player aspect to it. You still had to be online, but you could play it without interacting with anyone else. You didn't need any server side anything. It could all be hosted locally. So I'm going to be assuming that the people, both for and against um, the initiative, are misinformed or misunderstanding things where applicable. When it comes to Ross in particular, I am going to assume essentially that he misspoke. I think he said what he intended to say, but I don't think he intended to say what he said. If that makes sense. If not, I will try and make it make sense when I get to that point. Um, so we'll start with the big points. Thor argues. I'm going to be covering a lot of Thor because almost every video I've watched about this has been reacting to Thor reacting to this initiative. Addendum, predendum. I don't think predendum is a word. Almost predendum. Predendum 2. I am an American. I cannot sign the Stop Killing Games initiative. You probably figured out I was American from my accent. If you didn't, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not Australian either. So I'm not from the EU. I can't sign it even if I want to. And much like Thor, if I could sign it, I wouldn't. Not for the exact same reasons as Thor, but the overall, like the ultimate, I disagree with it in its current form and think it will do more harm than good. I will agree with that. When you get into his more specific reasons, I disagree because I think he misunderstands something. So, what have we got? Number one, we have Thor talking about the concept of, like I said, League of Legends going and becoming a single player experience. As an example, I think the idea of turning live service games or MMOs, anything of the sort, into a single player experience with a few notable exceptions is ridiculous, much like Thor does. I think expecting them to be able to do that at the end of life is absurd. I think it presents undue hardship on the developers. I think when I say notable exceptions, Final Fantasy XIV has introduced the trust system, so you can do dungeons and raids with. I don't know if you can do raids as trusts, but the framework is there if not. Um, So they could potentially turn that into a single player experience at this point without too much extra work on their part, I think. Um, versus League of Legends, which is player versus player. It is, as there may be bots that they use for League of Legends. I don't play League of Legends. I don't know. Um, but the idea of turning a game like League of Legends with its players and only players, and there's no real single player element to it into a single player experience, I think is absurd. Um, an MMO is, it's right there in the title. It's massively multiplayer online. That said, I think if you give people the ability to host private servers for an MMO, at that point it's up to them what they do. So that's kind of the first thing. I think Thor's argument is not made in bad faith. I think it is a fundamental misunderstanding of what's being asked. We then get to his argument that we should be calling out practices where a single player experience has an online only component that is essentially there just to either as DRM or for whatever reason, if there's no need for it. I think, again, I think Thor is right in that we should call out that kind of business practice. We should, a movement or initiative like Stop Killing Games should address that. I think there should be laws in place preventing taking a fundamentally single player experience, even if it has a multiplayer aspect or option. Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a great example. Um, I like Dark Souls as an example way better than The Crew because I'm more familiar with how Dark Souls works. Even though I've barely played Dark Souls. Point is, you can play through all of Dark Souls without interacting with other people. There are the I think they're called ghosts. I don't remember the exact terminology. I don't, like I said, I'm not really a big Dark Souls person. I just know more about it than The Crew because pop culture zeitgeist, basically. Um, you have where you can see other players doing things, how they died. They can leave messages on the ground, things like that. If you take that out, you have, in my opinion, not fundamentally altered the game. And even if you have, the game is still playable. You can still go from boss to boss, fighting all the enemies in between, fighting the bosses. You don't need another player in order to win. You don't need another player. You don't need that online aspect. So I think if you made Dark Souls an offline experience and kept it in a fundamentally playable state, I think that'd be fine. I think if you gave the server binaries or whatever to the public, let them host their own servers where people can do their ghosty thing, leave their messages, whatever, that's fine too. I think if there comes a point when, is it From Software, I think, does Dark Souls? I know they're the developers. I don't know necessarily who publishes it. I don't know who maintains the servers. Whoever it is that maintains those servers, when they decide that they are costing more than they're generating in revenue, when they make that decision and they decide to stop hosting the servers for Dark Souls, which they may have done already, I don't know. I don't, again, I don't play Dark Souls. If they were to revoke all access to Dark Souls, take it out of your library, like they did with The Crew, that's a problem. If they say you can't go online, you can't read the messages from other players, you can't, there's no, no multiplayer aspect anymore, you can't invade each other's worlds, none of that. Um, I think that is I think that's fine and valid and good. Um, which I think is going to bring me to my next point, which is licenses versus purchases. Um, I know I didn't really mention either of those, but I think it's going to be my best transition to this because it is relevant. My take on it. I think first of all we need to understand the difference between a license to a game versus a purchase of a game. If you go out and you buy a copy of Pokemon Scarlet or Pokemon Violet, I would hold up my copy, but it's at the other end of the house because I did not prepare. If you buy a physical copy, you own that. That is yours. At no point should Nintendo be able to take that away from you. And as far as I know, they can't. If you put that cartridge in your Switch in 10 years and your Switch still works, you should be able to boot up Pokemon Scarlet or Violet. That said, you probably won't be able to access a Wonder Trade, for example. You might be able to do a direct trade where you connect to a specific person without having to go, because that'd be like a peer-to-peer thing. That might be a thing. But a Wonder Trade where it's uploaded to the cloud and then you pull something back out, probably not. Um, versus a license. If you buy a digital copy of Pokemon Scarlet and they decide not to host, they decide to take down the Wonder Trades, take down the online functionality, and just leave you with a single player experience. You should, I think a license should be irrevocable. I would say except in extreme circumstances, but I can't think of extreme circumstances where I would think you should be allowed to take away something someone else purchased. I think the license should be irrevocable as long as the company hosting the content continues to exist. So people should be able to go in and download Pokemon Scarlet from the cloud forever, as long as Nintendo is still around. And I don't know that it works as well as on console, honestly, but because I understand the idea of taking down an eShop or whatever, but I think more accurately, as long as the storefront that you purchase on continues to exist, you should have access to the things you purchased on that storefront. So I'm kind of amending my argument a little bit as I'm speaking aloud, um, because if Valve decides they don't want to do the Steam thing anymore, they don't want to host those servers at all, they should be allowed to stop spending that money. But they should not be allowed to say, okay, well, I'm not selling any copies of to make it relevant to Thor again, because we're going to come back to that. We're not selling enough copies of Heartbound, so we're going to just stop. We're going to delete Heartbound from our servers. No, because people that connect to your servers have purchased Heartbound. You need to host at least the most recent patch indefinitely, as long as your storefront continues to exist, I think. Um, I'm not a game dev. I'm not, I'm not in the industry at all. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of. This is my own thoughts as a game. I almost called myself a connoisseur. That sounds pretentious. Basically, as long as Steam exists, I want to have access to my Steam library. Now, if I go to load up Team Fortress 2, and I've been banned from Team Fortress 2 because I said I said a racial slur. I'm not going to do that, but let's just say I did for the sake of argument. I got banned from Team Fortress 2 because I called someone a slur. I should still have access to Team Fortress 2. I should be able to connect to private servers. I should be able to interact with people who opt to interact with me, essentially. But I should not have access to the general public. A ban should not revoke your entire license. It should revoke your access to the general public, essentially. Um, like I said, licenses should be irrevocable as long as the storefront continues to operate. Will there come a day, potentially, when Steam can no longer host all of the things that it hosts, and for one reason or another, where they decide Steam just doesn't make me enough money, where Valve goes, Steam doesn't make us enough money, we need to go back to game development. That day might come. I don't think it's going to. I think when Steam goes away, it's because Steam has ceased to be a viable, not just viable for Valve as a primary income source, but as a storefront as a whole, for one reason or another. So as long as Steam continues to exist and be available, any game I've purchased on Steam, I should continue to have access to. any game I purchase on the Ubisoft Marketplace, including The Crew, which has been taken down, I should continue to have access to. But they don't have to maintain the servers. Whereas it should be essentially treated like physical media. As long as I have the thing, I have access to the thing. So as long as I have Steam, I have access to my Steam library. That is my physical media, essentially. Again, maybe there's something here I'm not thinking of. Maybe I am being unreasonable. I don't know. Maybe I'm misinformed. Beyond that, we get to Thor's argument that I don't remember what all I've touched on so far. I don't remember what all I've touched on with Thor because there's been I've had a lot of thoughts because I've been watching a lot of these videos. So I'm just going to move on to what I know I haven't touched on yet, which is Ross's video. I think Ross, again, is well intentioned. I think Stop Killing Games is a good thing. As I understand it, Ross is essentially the face of this movement, and I think that's bad because I don't think Ross has the charisma. I don't think Ross necessarily has the understanding of politics or game development to be the face of this. I think a lot of things. I think, much like Thor, I think his argument that governments like easy wins. I think his argument that they don't care about a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think his argument that it distracts from other more important issues. I think all of those are bad arguments. I don't think it's because of any malicious intent on Ross's part. I think it is just like I said, I don't know if it's a misunderstanding of politics, whatever it may be. I think those are bad arguments to make. He's not necessarily. I don't know that I think he's necessarily wrong about any of those points. Those wouldn't be, at least not my big selling points. Those would not be my focus. I might think those to myself. I might have that discussion privately. My video is not going to be, oh, the government wants an easy win. My argument is going to be that consumer protection is in the public's best interest. My argument is going to be that property rights are important. And that people should have access to the things they buy, which I think is a point he tries to make at one point. But again, I don't think he articulates it very well. Here in the US, if I were pitching Stop Killing Games, I would focus on property rights, the fact that when you buy a thing, you should continue to have access to a thing. I would focus on the difference between a license and a purchase, but not in the way that Thor does, where you are buying a temporary license. I would say that a license gives you access, or should give you access to a thing for the life of whoever is hosting the thing. Whereas if you purchase physical media, and this is why I miss physical media, it's why I still buy physical Switch games. When I buy a copy of Pokemon Scarlet, I may not get access to all the latest patches in 10 years, but I can still put that in my Switch and play it. As far as I know, I don't actually know how, if, I don't know. Maybe. That's what I think will happen. I think that I would focus on, again, consumer protection. A lot of focus on the ways it benefits the consumer. I would focus on how it could benefit developers, because developer lobbyists are going to, game industry lobbyists are going to say and argue what they're going to say and argue. And again, they're doing what they think is best for the industry and are not necessarily arguing in bad faith and are not necessarily malicious to anyone. They're doing their job to the best of their ability. And unfortunately, their job is, to an extent, to operate against the consumer. I think any bill or initiative or anything of the sort, I don't know that I'd go so far as you need to find a middle ground between game developers, lobbyists, whoever, and gamers. I think what you need to do is you need to get their goals aligned. Now, one way to do that is by reaching a middle ground, but another is by, I'm going to use an example from when I worked at the cable company. I had a customer call in who was very upset and did not believe that anything I was telling him was true. We're not going to go into the specifics of his issue. It doesn't matter. Point is, he called in. He was upset. He was calling me a liar. He was calling me slurs. He was an unhappy gentleman. Everyone's unhappy when they call the cable company, right? So I went in and I essentially told him, look, I understand you're frustrated. I get it. I'd be pissed off too. I didn't say pissed off, but I would be pissed off too, in this situation. However, lying to you doesn't benefit either of us, right? If I lie to you, you're going to call back because your problem's not going to be fixed. You're still going to have the same issue you called in with, and you're just going to want someone else to fix it. That's not good for you. That wastes your time. Waste your time, potentially insults your intelligence. It's not good. My calls are monitored. If I'm found lying to a customer, that gets me in trouble. That's not good for me. So regardless of what the company wants, it's in my best interest to help you. So you don't have to believe that the company cares about you or anything of that sort. What I want you to believe and understand is it is in my best interest to make you happy because you keep giving my company money, then they keep giving me money. If I lie to you, at best, I get in trouble. That is my best case scenario if I'm lying to you. And it's kind of the same thing. You have to show that you are not trying to take advantage. You are not trying to manipulate. You are looking for a solution you're looking for something that benefits everyone, even if it doesn't. It's not necessarily in everyone's best interest. So, for example, were I trying to pitch to a lobbyist that Stop Killing Games, which again, I don't think Stop Killing Games is good. I think it's got good intent. I think it's poorly written, poorly defended. Were I trying to pitch it to a lobbyist, though, I would say that it would build trust from the consumer to the games industry, to developers, to publishers, to storefronts. That's going to get people more willing to spend the money because they know they're not going to lose the thing that they bought. Now I've kind of created an alignment, right? This is not where I thought this video was going to go at all. This is what happens when you don't script things. You go completely off topic while staying on topic. So I think, to bring it back around, right? I think that Stop Killing Games, well-intentioned, poorly executed. I think it needs to be rewritten, reworked from the ground up. Were I trying to make a Stop Killing Games initiative of my own, I would focus on, like Thor said, I would focus on single-player online, requirement DRM type issues. I would focus on the difference between a license and a purchase, that you only have access to the thing as long as the thing continues to exist. Or more accurately, the thing hosting the thing continues to exist. I would want it. When Steam goes away, I don't expect to continue to have my Steam library. But as long as Steam continues to exist, I expect to continue to have everything in my Steam library unless I return it for a refund. I would focus on I'm way off the rails here. I don't think I finished any of my points. Yay, ADHD. I would focus on the idea that at end of life, a developer is not expected to rework a game to create something fundamentally different that still gives you access to what you purchased, right? So you don't have to create single player League of Legends. What you do have to do is give players the ability to access private servers. That means releasing a server executable or something so that people can host their own servers and you can connect to it. If nobody wants to host a server, well, then you don't get to play it, but that's not because of anything the game dev did. Sorry, getting very thirsty. Mouth getting dry because I've been talking for 25 minutes. So I think those are the three main things you want to focus on. Difference between a license and a purchase. The license gets you access to the thing for the life of the thing. And the life of the thing is the life of whatever is hosting the thing. At end of life, you get access to all of the things needed to continue to run the thing. So that means servers, things like that. You get access to that. I saw someone talk about the idea that games go into the public domain at end of life. I don't know that I'd go quite that far, because you're not allowed. I don't think you should be allowed to monetize because that incentivizes, right? I play Pokemon. I play Pokemon ROM hacks. I'm not going to name any specific one because I don't want to draw the ire of Nintendo to anyone in particular. They should not be able to make money off of Pokemon ROM hacks. I think that's what you wind up with when you put it in the public domain. So I think putting it in the public domain is going a little too far. But Pokemon ROM hacks, especially if once Nintendo has decided we're not doing anything with Pokemon Fire Red anymore, right? So Pokemon Fire Red ROM hack should be allowed to exist. Nintendo shouldn't be allowed to send them a cease and desist unless they try to monetize it. But as long as Nintendo is continuing to host servers and make money and sell Pokemon Fire Red, then ROM hacks, I hate saying this, but things like ROM hacks, if they want to send a cease and desist, I think they should be allowed to, because it detracts from, especially ROM hosting sites. ROM hacks less so because it is transformative in nature. But ROM hosting sites are fundamentally taking away their ability to sell Pokemon Fire Red. It is piracy. How did I get to piracy? I'm running out of time. I've only got 3 minutes left on this. So, as long as Nintendo is selling the thing, you should not be able to host the thing elsewhere. But you should not be allowed to monetize the thing once Nintendo stops selling the thing, because that incentivizes people to attack Nintendo, like Thor talks about. So I think there's a fine line to be walked, and that's something that lawyers need to hash out with game devs and whoever. That's so far beyond me. I think I've said so much. I don't remember what all I've said. And yet I feel like I haven't said nearly enough. Because, like I said, ADHD, I don't know that I finished any of these trains of thought. But I'm going to upload it anyways, and if people have questions, I will answer them. If there are enough repeats of a question, I'll make another video, and I'll have things in front of me so that I can hopefully stay on task a little bit better. I've got a minute and a half left on this, so I'm just going to wrap it up. License versus purchase. No arguments. Like, no bad arguments. We're all going to make bad arguments. We're human. We're flawed. But I think arguments like governments like easy wins, bad, not good for the industry, not good for the initiative. God, I've gone so far off track. I'm trying to bring it back around in this last minute. Yeah, I think that nobody had ill intent when they made their videos, when they made their initiatives, etc. I just think the initiative is poorly worded, poorly written. It needs to be hammered out a lot more before it goes in front of lawmakers and lobbyists. I think Thor misunderstood and was misinformed, and I think that's the case for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I think this is a good conversation we need to continue to have, and I'm going to end it there.